On the Big Bad Show, we have Donald Trump Jr., not to be confused with the original Donald Trump.
That is the senior. Then there's the junior. And as our research has given us, there is also a, what is that, a double junior? Third.
No, a third.
Yeah. So a double junior. See,
we're not a McDonald's. Which I do want to ask him about, though, too, because Donald Trump Jr. has more than one son.
Yeah.
And yet only one of them is Donald Trump III. Can you do Donald Trump IV?
You can keep going.
Without skipping a generation? Can you do that? Could you have them as siblings?
You can't. I don't think you can have that.
You can't do that.
I mean, I thought they were two doubles a second ago, so I'm not the right guy to ask. But it's been really interesting because we got Donald through chatting with him on Twitter, and I think he's kind of, people think of his dad as like a real right-wing kind of nut and the anti-gay stuff and all that. But I have a feeling that he's not quite there on all that stuff, so we'll ask him about it.
And you've been watching Celebrity Apprentice.
It is my one reality show.
Interesting, because it's the one reality show I haven't been watching.
Well, because I want to give you reality TV. I knew you weren't watching this one. So
God forbid we have crossover.
This was the one I took for myself.
All right. Donald Trump Jr. is on the line.
How's it going?
We're excited to have you on the show. I have been Twitter stalking you for a long time. Is this how you make most of your connections these days?
Honestly, strangely enough, it actually seems like that is the way I make most of my connections. I think any new friends I have, it's from Twitter.
You're on there. Now, I think people think of you like as a serious guy, but you're a funny dude on Twitter.
I try. I wear a suit all day, and then people respond, well, on the show you look so serious. Is this really you writing? It's like, well, I'm on a business show on network television. Like, I can't be a total jerk. You know what I mean? Like, I have to have some sort of credibility. Just because I have a day job that's serious doesn't mean I can't have a personality outside of that. So, it's been kind of a cool platform because people can kind of see who I am when I'm not in a tie.
Yeah.
Now, Celebrity Apprentice, it's pretty cool because it's become like a career booster. And also sort of like a comeback platform. Joan Rivers has said that her career came back from Celebrity Apprentice. What do you make of that?
Well, listen, I think when people see people perform time and time again and, outdo other people who are, otherwise quite competent in whatever it is that they do, I think it's given them a real boost. I mean, if you really look at it, look at Bret Michaels, look at Piers Morgan taking over for Larry King, from being a journalist and even a tabloid journalist and, getting a very serious job. I mean, I think people see the level of performance and the competence that really you can show on the show. And, I think for other people, you see a side of them that you may not want to see and that may not be that beneficial for them. But ultimately, if you perform, I think it certainly has proven to translate into real opportunities for their employment.
Yeah. So before we get into the specifics of the level of competence of the cast of characters this season, how are you feeling and how is your dad feeling about just sort of the overall arch of we're entering, I guess, the fourth week coming right now?
Yeah, it's interesting because it always takes a little time to build. The first couple of weeks, people forget that the cameras are on them. They're not really thinking about, or they're actually very cognizantly thinking about how they're going to act. But there comes a point. I mean, and what people don't really realize on the show is, you see 2 hours, but these guys are working 24/7 for 2 months at a time. I mean, it's really amazing the level of work that goes into this. And so after a while, you sort of forget. So definitely the first episode's never a great episode because people are still happy-go-lucky. They think it's never going to happen to them. They think they're going to maintain friendships. And ultimately, after a little bit of time, that all changes rapidly.
It certainly does.
Now, we see you mostly in the boardroom. So walk us through the boardroom. How long does that entire process take?
People always ask because it's actually an interesting question. I mean, some are quick, some are basically almost what you see, and others, there's boardrooms that I've been in that go for 4 hours.
Wow.
Because, again, none of it's really scripted, and sometimes these guys go after each other, and, you can only see a certain amount of time because it's all we're left on television. You sort of have to see who ends up getting fired, who buries themselves in there, and sort of edit backwards to make everything relevant. I'd love to eventually one day just do, like, an outtake scene movie from the boardroom because, I mean, I've seen so much amazing stuff that would just be, if you have a sick sense of humor like I do, it's sort of amazing material. It just may not be relevant to the outcome of whatever happens on the episode, so you don't get to see it. Ends up on the cutting room floor, so it's sort of a shame. But those things, they can go on. I mean, they average probably at least 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours average. Some go longer, some go a little bit less. But there's a lot of stuff going on. It's pretty intense.
Now, I gotta ask you about the receptionist, the boardroom receptionist. Also,
yes, Amanda Miller.
Yes, we're all obsessed with her.
And then Adrian, the elevator operator. So, do they actually work for the Trump company, or is this just for the show?
They actually work for the Trump company. Adrian actually does work as an elevator operator in Trump Tower. He's a great guy. And Amanda Miller is actually, the head of our marketing department. So she's actually there. I guess she just has a certain look that also works for television. So they turned her into a receptionist, but she's actually in our marketing department.
Yeah, she's very good. Every time the camera goes to her, she makes sure she's like fiddling her with her papers, and there's
I think the camera guys have some sort of crush on her because when everything's said and done, they'll sit there and film her doing that for like an hour. I'm like, guys, it's only going to end up on there for like 3 seconds. They're like, no, we want to make sure this is right.
They're like, one more time. Yeah.
All right, so just to catch people up in case they haven't been watching, so Cheryl Tiegs went out the first week, and actually it sort of goes to what you were saying about the build of it, because it almost was like she really wasn't that interested in being there in the first place. And
you got to want it. I think she got there, and I think everyone, no one has done the show, and I've gotten pretty friendly with a lot of the contestants throughout all the seasons, and no one's ever gotten off the show being like, oh, wow, that was easier than I thought. So I think for some people, it's a real rude awakening of how difficult it actually is.
Yeah, so then it was Victoria Gotti, and
correct.
But then it was the guy we want to talk to you about because he's a friend of ours and a friend of the show, George Takei.
Yeah.
So first off, in the first week, it was very interesting what happened because, Paul Sr. said that he was meek. And your dad actually came out and defended George, not only for being on the forefront of LGBT rights, but he had, lived through an American-Japanese internment camp. How did that whole thing play out? It must have been pretty tense in there.
Yeah, it was pretty tense because I think he said that and basically everyone looked and was like, I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
But I think it's also Paul, and he's a tough guy, and he's kind of a harsh guy, and he's probably known more for his mechanical skills than his linguistic skills. Hey, listen, it is what it is, right? Like, I'm probably better with words than I am, if you ask me to build a motorcycle, and I know what I'm good at.
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I'm better than you'd think, actually, for a spoiled, kid from Fifth Avenue, but, I can hold my own. I'm kind of a, closet redneck. But, I think he recognized that it was wrong and it wasn't the right word. That said, as a leader on the task, George was probably a little less interested. He wasn't as forceful as perhaps he needed to be to get everything together. And, I think you saw that. But meek definitely wasn't the right word. I mean, George is a tough guy in his own right. And certainly with that voice and the way he kind of delivers things for the most part, other than, he did stammer a little bit in front of Ivanka on the task delivery. For the most part, he comes across really well.
Yeah, and one thing I have to say I was impressed with is because, your dad has said before that he's not for gay marriage, but in this particular instance, he did defend George. So where do you fall on when it comes to that kind of stuff, actually?
Honestly, I'm kind of, other than certain social issues, I sort of tend to err like right of Attila the Hun. But like honestly, there's for me abortion. I don't get it. I don't even understand how it's a political issue. I don't understand how there's one issue voters for that. It's I don't understand how you can tell someone what they can or can't do. And I'm sort of the same way with that. I had gay friends growing up. Now I'm from New York City, so it's a little bit different. I'm exposed to it. For me, it's I was with gay friends last night. It was never a big deal for me. I mean, I think, there was a time in my life, probably in college, that I wished every guy was gay because it just meant more women for me. I don't know why you guys have a problem with this thing. I think it'd be great. I wish everyone was gay.
That's the best response we've gotten on our show from a straight guy so far.
You say it, and they kind of think about it, be like, "Hey, you're right." I'm like, "You're kind of an idiot, aren't you?" It's kind of so. That's kind of always the way I thought about it. Again, now that's a factor of just exposure, being from New York, being So, I have no issue with it. I mean, if people want to, if I have to suffer through marriage, why shouldn't they?
Right. So we actually saw George recently, and he said that he asked your dad to have a lunch summit to actually talk about these issues about gay marriage and gay rights. And George, as we know, is an incredibly reasonable guy. Do you think that he might be able to talk some sense into your dad?
I know they did it because I saw them filming it, and it actually happened. It actually happened this week in our boardroom. Now, I honestly, I've had one of those weeks where I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off, so I don't know what the end result, of that is. I think, in terms of my father's political views, I don't want to speak for him, but I think in the grand scheme of things, it's, there's probably other things he'd be concerned about first. Mm-hmm. Given the state of the world and our economy, et cetera, and I think, for me, I think part of it, and again, I don't want to speak for him because who the hell knows, but, I think part of it, and perhaps the shame of being a conservative, is that you almost have to have those kind of stances to become or to win any kind of primary, and then you have to basically sell out and become a moderate in the middle, just like you have to do if you're on the liberal side of, the political spectrum, where you have to be, kind of left of Obama to get the primary vote, and then you have to become a centrist in the middle, which by definition I think makes everyone a hypocrite in politics, which, is pretty much, my view of the whole thing. But, it's why I'd have no future in politics, because I don't know, I can't buy into the abortion argument. I wish the Republicans would drop it as part of their platform, and frankly, most of them do. Meaning they say, "Oh yeah, I'm really for it," but yet they do nothing to try to change it. So I don't know, but that's kind of my stance on it. I'm totally for it. Actually, one of my best friends growing up was gay. He's married. I had lunch with him yesterday. So, it's never been an issue for me.
Yeah, I have to say it's very refreshing to hear that, because I think probably most people assume that whatever your dad says, that sort of stands for the whole family. So it's kind of cool that, you guys are all having your own thoughts and feelings. And also, because I'm following you on Twitter, I know that, obviously your dad's supporting Romney, but you've been sticking it to Santorum a little bit on some of this social stuff.
The guy's a freaking joke. First of all, I can say this because I lived in Pennsylvania for 9 years of my life growing up. I went to boarding school there. I went to college there. So, I was from his home state. And I mean, some of the stuff that he says, I'm like, I can't believe it. When they're like, "Oh, he's so progressive for progressive for 1742."
I think that was the one.
I don't even understand. I mean, the guy's platform, the number one issue is he doesn't want to see single parent families. And yet he's also opposed to contraception, which to me is like the dumbest, oxymoron in the world. And by the way, even if you were to go for that, that implies that effectively abstinence is the program that you're going to try to push forth, which, I mean, you try telling that to a 14-year-old kid. Like, it's just not realistic. And so when people make these kind of stupid assertions, it's just like I can't respect someone like that. So it's like, listen, I think Romney's a brilliant business guy. I think he's the guy that, and maybe he's not as conservative as the Republican base would want, but I think that's actually the person who can probably win a real election when you're talking about catering to people who are either independent voters or swing voters in these states where that matters. So someone who's got these archaic beliefs, it's like, yeah, it's great for a primary where everyone's really gung-ho Republican and you're only appealing to Republicans. But when you have to appeal to a broader base, I just don't think you can lock yourself in that way. But again, my political views are my political views. Yeah. And I know that everyone probably believes that, in our family, you have to follow, but listen, we're not robots. We do have minds of our own. And, I think I'll certainly defer to my father on anything business related, but, I am going to have my own opinions regardless. But listen, I think for the most part, we are probably very much in line, certainly on the issues that I think matter most to the future of our country.
Yeah. I have to say, following you on Twitter, I found out something I was very impressed with, and talk about appealing to a Republican base. You, sir, are a shooter and a hunter and put your own venison on the table?
Ooh.
Yeah, like I said, I'm kind of a closet redneck. I shoot competitively. I'm a avid fly fisherman, big-time hunter, bow hunter, rifle hunter. So, I do all of that. So, that's what I think surprises a lot of people. I sort of end up in some, redneck circles and I mean that in the positive sense of the word, circles every once in a while, and they kind of look, they either don't know who I am, and I'm cool from the beginning, and then they find out, and they're like, "Oh, why didn't you tell me that?" Well, because you probably wouldn't have given me a shot, or they think, or they know my name and assume that I'm some sort of asshole, only to find out that I can actually hang and could probably know more, walk the walk better than most of them. So, I have a lot of fun with it. I try to, do what I can to decompress, get out of the kind of New York City life in what little free time I have, and kind of expose my kids to that, because I think, the city's great, but I think it can also get you in a lot of trouble growing up, and so the outdoors has always been very good for me that way.
Yeah, so speaking of kids, so you are a family man, and when we were trying to arrange this interview, you were saying how, you need the weekends for your kids and all that kind of stuff. So do you think your issues will evolve when suddenly your kids are 14? Because, it's one thing to say it when your kids are younger than that right now, right?
Listen, I definitely understand where you're going, and I'm sure everyone has a little bit of that, do as I say, not as I do, kind of mentality. But at the same time, you have to be realistic. I think being a parent, knowing what I did at that time, I'm a young enough parent. I'm 34. I already have 3 kids. I think. And I hope that when they're of that age, I will still have been able to say, well, I wrote the playbook on that crap. You're not going to get away with it, but I'm sure they evolve and they'll figure out a way to get around things just like I did.
Yeah.
So, listen, I think you have to, have a reasonable understanding of what's likely to happen. And I think you can be overly protective and become a total control freak, but we all see what happens to kids who have those kind of parents. And, I'm sure I know plenty of guys that definitely, were preying on, say, girls that had daddy issues and stuff. So it's like, you gotta, you gotta have, a blend. You just can't rule with an iron fist with kids, because they'll figure out a way around it, or it'll affect them for life. You have to kind of let them make their own mistakes, even if you don't really want to see that happen. You can't prep them for everything.
Ben, this is getting more psychologically deep than I thought we were going to.
I know.
I'm
Who
impressed.
knew?
Very
Who
nice.
knew?
Yeah.
Well,
Hard to believe, I'm more than just a reality TV guy.
Well, and one of your kids is Donald Trump III. So I got to ask you, is there pressure on him? Is he like the heir to the Trump empire? And what about the other ones?
I don't know. I think, my siblings and we all work in the company. I don't know that there's anyone that's, we all work collectively. We have a very fortunate relationship in a family business to be able to function well that way, where there's no infighting. I mean, we work together every day, and yet next week we're vacationing together. So, meaning my sister, my brother, myself, and our respective families and everything. So,
right.
We're very lucky that we get along that way. I think, there's, to the Donald Trump III question, I guess there's a little bit of a mix. I mean, I think there's times where there could be added pressure on me because I'm the son of this, and people say, "Oh my God, are you Donald Trump?" It's like, no, I'm a little bit younger than him. And it's a little, so there's a mix where there perhaps is a little extra pressure. At the same time, I'm really proud of a lot of his accomplishments and everything that he's been able to do in life. I'm a junior, as sort of a little bit of just an honor to be able to pass that on to my kid, and he should be hopefully very proud of what his grandfather did, as well as perhaps what I do. So there is an added element of pressure. I don't know that it changes anything or really doesn't. Who knows? I guess in anything else, there's a good and a bad side of things, and hopefully you're able to harness the good and get rid of the bad and deal with it that way.
Yeah. Well, actually, speaking of his grandfather, your father, this all sort of came together. Now, I'm not going to say where you live, but you happen to live not in a Donald Trump building. I will say that much. But you live next door to my grandmother. Just by...
That's right. You mentioned that on our little Twitter conversation.
Yeah, so if a crazy old lady just starts knocking on your door one of these days, I just want you to know she's very sweet, and she's a good cook if you guys are hungry.
Very cool. Well, I mean, Rubin, so I'm assuming Jewish, if I can say that without being politically incorrect. Definitely, I'm sure she feeds you well.
She does.
It's actually going to be Dave knocking on your door, not the grandmother. Just be warned.
Well, my wife's Italian, so it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. It's a lot of food.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, Donald, thank you so much for checking into the six-pack.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me on. It was a real pleasure, and good finally talking. I'm sure we'll go back and forth by Twitter.
Awesome. We appreciate it, and we'll see you in 140 characters.
Hey, guys, be well.
All right. It's all done.
All right, and we should remind people, Celebrity Apprentice 5 is on Sunday nights on NBC. They also just came out with the Celebrity Apprentice app.
They have an app, too?
They have an app.
Man, that's a lot of stuff. We didn't really clarify the junior, triple, quadruple thing, did we?
That's what Wikipedia is for.
We'll tweet them about it later.
The Six Pack.